Hi, I'm David Fosberg, and this is our first installment of the Drive Collective podcast. We're recording at Drive Collective, enthusiast car storage and drivers community all in one. And we really believe that we want to bring the drive alive for our members and for the greater car community. So this podcast is about getting insight from leaders in our industry and our local car community about what you can do to really elevate and bring your drive alive, whether you're on track, you're on street, or you just want to enjoy your car more thoroughly. That's what this podcast is all about. And for our first installment, I'm with Eddie Nakato. Eddie is a friend of mine that I've known for over 13 years. We actually met at Portland International Raceway at a track event. And Eddie is a fantastic driver. He's a great businessman, and he really is invested in helping the enthusiast elevate their driving, their car preparation, and I thought he would be a great first guest for the Drive Collective podcast to share a little bit of his insights. But Eddie, tell our audience a little bit more about what you do professionally and what you've been doing here in the Portland car community.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I'm honored to be the first guest. Hopefully, I'll do a good job of it this time around. So, my name is Eddie. I'm with AR Motorsports. I'm also the owner of Cobalt Racing Brakes, and we've been around in the industry since 2008 or 2007. I'm not exactly sure at the year anymore, but that's probably not a bad thing. Um, we started off, doing basic service, and we've kind of branched off into doing motorsports specific things. And one of the big things that we're, really excited about is helping people kind of join and enter the motorsports community, whether it's through track days, road course racing, autocross, or any other way. So, we try to bring our knowledge to kind of guide people along those lines and find them the place that they fit best.
That's great. And this fits so nicely with our very first topic for the Drive Collective podcast. The generic question is, for those that have watched motorsports and now want to be a part of it themselves, how do you get started in motorsport? And we're going to have not only Eddie talking today, but some future guests to talk about it from their different perspective. But today, we're going to narrow down that topic on talking exclusively about the car. How do we prepare the car for that first entry into motorsports? Eddie talked about there's several different avenues that people that are interested in starting in motorsports can start with, whether that be autocross, track days, performance driving events. There's lots of different ways, but sometimes people start by showing up with a high performance car that they've only been driving on the street, or sometimes they've expressed interest in wanting to do motorsports but haven't bought that first car yet. So I kind of wanted to bounce back and forth with you, Eddie, and maybe look at a person who has a car and wants to approach motorsports or getting on track, and then maybe we can flip the script a little bit and provide some coaching and guidance for those people that haven't yet bought that car and they want to use that as their platform to get into motorsports. And maybe we can see if there's some similarities, some differences, but maybe we just kick that off with the first one. I know when I first saw you 13 years ago, I brought this high horsepower Chevy Camaro ZL1 supercharged with 555 horsepower to the track. And I was really excited. And I think my driver coach jumped into my seat and he said, "All right, David, the first thing you need to know about this car is you've got about 300 more horsepower than you need." And that was really good coaching. But before you even get to the track, is there something that our audience should know about taking that first street car and preparing it for their first entry on track?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of very important things that need to be looked at, but it's actually a lot simpler than most people think. Most people get this idea that your car needs to be prepared. It has to have the suspension and the tires and the brakes and the motor mods and all these things. And the reality is, it doesn't need any of those things. The reality is, you need some basic maintenance, and you don't even need a sports car. I've seen people show up to track days in a Honda CR-V, and it doesn't need to be modified. As long as you have a fresh set of tires that are relatively new, fresh high performance brake fluid, plenty of brake pad, of course, and then equally important, making sure all your fluids are topped up. That's really all that you need to do to pretty much any vehicle to show up to a track day or an autocross or something very entry level without having, without having any issues.
So I've heard some people express their interest, but they said, I'm going to ruin or break my car if I take it to a track event where there's so much dynamics going on. Can people rest assured that a car from the factory with the kind of basic maintenance you talked about, can it survive a track event?
Yeah, I would say most of the cars can survive. I would say 98% of the cars can survive. Yes, if you show up with an F-350 4x4, it might not survive. But for the most part, if it's even modestly sporting, it's going to survive just fine as long as you listen to your car and understand that when your car says, "Hey, I'm not having a good time," you got to back off. Some people have a propensity to overdrive their cars at first, not understanding how to properly utilize their equipment to its maximum potential. And so you might find that your brakes are inadequate when you start off, but as you get faster, it turns out you don't have to slow down as much, you don't use as much brakes. And so there are some caveats to that, but in general, most factory cars, properly maintained, will be just fine as is off the showroom floor.
And most cars that come off the showroom, they're going to be running, for example, DOT3 brake fluid typically. Would you recommend an owner show up with that factory DOT3, or should they step up their game from a brake fluid perspective?
It wouldn't hurt. Believe it or not, most modern sports cars all come with DOT4 fluid now, which has a slightly higher wet and dry boiling point minimum. But more than anything, fresh fluid is the most important part. A 1-year-old DOT4 fluid is probably not significantly better than a fresh DOT3 fluid. So, the name of the game is fresh. As long as everything's fresh, you should be just fine.
And the science behind it is that brake fluid tends to attract and absorb moisture, right? We're recording this in Oregon right now, so cars that just sit, or if it's a dedicated track day toy, doesn't get driven a lot, that thing, even sitting, is going to absorb moisture. And that moisture is compressible, right? And that's what causes things to heat up and boil and to.
Yes and no. Depends on how far you want to get into brake fluid. Brake fluid's an interesting topic. But brake fluid is designed to be hygroscopic, which means it attracts water and mixes with water. And that's on purpose, because if you get pockets of water, it'll rust. So it wants to absorb the moisture. The problem is once you absorb 1 or 2% moisture content, the brake fluid's boiling point drops dramatically. And that drops whether you're sitting, whether you're driving, it doesn't matter what you're doing with it, it's just going to drop with time. And in particularly humid environments or wet environments like the Pacific Northwest winters, or if you're on the other side of the country, humid summers, it's just going to absorb it right out of the atmosphere, and that's going to lower the boiling point. So, ultimately, again, like we were just talking about, the key is fresh fluid. Doesn't matter what or how, but fresh fluid is going to be the key. And we normally recommend once at the beginning of the season. If you're heavy on the brakes, maybe once in the middle of the season, and then you can wait until the following season after to do it. So once every 6 months is usually adequate enough. If you find that you're boiling your fresh brake fluid, the problem isn't the brake fluid. The problem is that you have inadequate brake hardware.
Okay, let's stay on brakes. We'll leave fluid where it is. Let's move over to pads. Um, can somebody just starting out just show up with their OEM pads? Should they be looking at more aggressive pads for a first track event?
10 years ago, I would have told you don't show up with your OEM pads. You'll make it just a few laps and it won't work. Modern cars, I'd say, let's say within the last 8 years or so, most of the sports cars come with pretty substantial brakes. And the brake pads are aggressive enough that as a new driver, you're probably going to be okay. I mean, will you find the limits? Probably. But if you just back off a little bit, they'll probably be just fine. So there's no need to go out and buy a set of high performance brake pads because those come with their own pluses and minuses, whether they become dustier, noisier, non-streetable, whether they wear the discs faster. There's a lot of drawbacks with high performance components. And so making that leap is something you want to do with the full understanding of, the downsides of what you're going to do. So For most modern cars, I would say just start with the OE pads, and as you outgrow them, you can move on to the aftermarket stuff.
Okay. Let's stay on the corners. Moving from brakes to tires.
Hmm.
Is there any style of tires you definitely shouldn't show up to the track with, or is it more of a fresh and good tread depth kind of thing?
I think it's back to newer tires, fresh, good tread depth. You can track a car in almost any kind of tire. That being said, some of the less sporting tires can chunk, and their life cycle can be excessively short. So it's important that you have hopefully at least a somewhat sports type tire, and then the rest is really down to how you drive it. If you drive the ever living daylights out of the tire and don't back off when it's trying to tell you back off, you will absolutely destroy that tire. If you listen to your car and you're very smooth with your inputs, even a fairly hard all-season tire will work just fine.
So all seasons you can actually show up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Um, Leaving the corners with the tires and braking, and a lot of people really focus, I've noticed, on suspension. I can't go to my first track event until I get coilovers. I need to get, really tough bushings to absorb all the stresses that's going to be on there. Again, these factory cars are built for street. Is it correct that all this money has to be thrown at a car's suspension before you can show up on your first track event?
Not necessarily. I mean, all those things make the car more enjoyable to drive on the track. It's going to be faster. It's going to be sharper. It may hold up to the track stresses a little bit better. But is it necessary? Absolutely not. The factory bushings, the factory ball joints, all work fairly well, especially as a new driver. Like when you're first trying to get to the track, which is what we're talking about. The strain you're going to put on the car is a lot lower than you think it is. I know everybody thinks that they are Lewis Hamilton right out of the gate, but you'd be surprised at how many of us are not.
Yeah.
And so, factory components, factory suspension, while not ideal, will work just fine. I mean, a more aggressive alignment, if your car is capable of getting one, wouldn't hurt. Usually, the factory limitations are fairly low, so there's not much you can do with it. But even a little bit can definitely help the tire wear and the overall behavior of the car. But other than that, factory springs, factory shocks, actually usually work better than most entry level and low dollar coilovers and springs and shock combinations.
So you mentioned alignment, for track purposes, would that be looking at camber, toe in, toe out kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's really down to what configuration the car comes in from the factory. Some cars are designed to, have the rear end heavily stabilized so the car won't rotate in a corner. Some of them are designed to make the front end slide first so that you nose into an accident, which is much safer. It really depends on kind of the configuration, the drive configuration of the car, the overall balance of the car, what the manufacturer intended the car to do, and figuring out from there what you need the car to do. But uh, the manufacturer always has limitations on tire longevity, comfort, noise, cost. And so they're always going to have a compromise in some way, shape, or form. And as long as you understand that you have to give up some of the compromises, or you have to make some of your own compromises that are even greater to get that extra performance, there's no major downside to getting a slightly more aggressive alignment or something of that nature.
Engine, power, cooling. Does a first timer who's just putting their toe in the water need to do anything special there?
I wouldn't think so. Again, cooling always helps. Modern cars are all direct injected and turbocharged. They're extremely powerful and they generate a ton of heat. So extra cooling never hurts. But is it necessary? No. The factory car has been tested to run, in the middle of the desert, on top of a mountain, in the hottest and most humid weather, and it's designed to work reasonably reliably in that condition. So again, as long as you're listening to your car and understand that when it tells you, "Hey, I'm too hot," or "I'm too, this or that," that you back off, it should work out just fine. You don't need to pour any money into the car on that aspect. Would it be nice? Absolutely, but so is every other component in the car. It would be nice, but it's not necessary.
Am I going to be able to drive my car home after a track event, or is that thing going to be so overworked that wouldn't be almost considered unsafe for me to drive it home? I hear a lot of people say, I'm not sure if my car can get through the stresses.
That's purely up to the owner. Again, if your car is unhappy, whether it's the tires or the brakes or the engine or some other aspect of it, if you keep driving it, yeah, it will be unsafe to drive home. But if you listen to your car, you have some mechanical sympathy, and back off when the car is no longer happy with what you're doing, it's perfectly fine. It's just when you keep pounding on that car when it's unhappy, that's when the damage occurs.
And some of that unhappiness is exhibited maybe by tires making certain noises that you can listen for, right? A lot of these first entry events, they require you to put your windows down for safety purposes, but that gives the driver an opportunity to listen to what the tires are doing. What would be an unhappy tire, as an example?
That's a hard one. Some of the modern tires make little to no noise. And so using the tire as, the audible noise the tire generates as kind of your marker as to when the tire is unhappy isn't always something you can do. But, I read, I think maybe it was a Mario Andretti quote, but he said a squealing tire is a happy tire, a moaning tire is an unhappy tire. And I don't know that that necessarily still holds true with some of these new compounds that we have. But in general, if you get a lot of feedback to the steering wheel, the tire starts shaking and scrubbing and doing things where it just doesn't have any grip anymore, that's an unhappy tire. And same thing with the brakes. If the pedal starts going long or the brake pads just don't bite, even though the pedal's still hard, it's a brake pad that's starting to get unhappy. If your engine starts losing significant horsepower, it's probably a little bit hot. So there are signs, and they're not subtle signs. So it's just up to the driver to really kind of back down on the red mist a little bit, listen to the car, and realize that it does have limitations, and find where those limitations are, and don't exceed them regularly. You can exceed them from time to time, but just don't do it regularly.
Right. And tire happiness, uh, I see a lot of people show up and they're come off track and they're putting a tire pressure gauge immediately. They're getting their chalk out and they're putting lines across the sidewall of the tire. What are those people doing?
That's it's a useful thing. It was very useful, years ago, and it's still useful today. Essentially, that chalk mark is trying to find out how far down the sidewall that tire is rolling over. And the theory is that if you have the right tire pressure, the tire is only going to roll over to a certain point, which is supposed to be the ideal point. I think that that's useful as a very gross tuning tool, but the reality is that what's happening at the tread carcass, where the tire meets the road, is much more important.
Any differences in car prep that needs to be done if you're doing autocross versus a high performance track day?
I don't feel like there's a significant difference. I mean, we're back to fresh tires, fresh brakes, and fresh fluid.
Yeah.
Autocross obviously is a much shorter duration, and it can be, because autocross guys are gonna kill me if I say it's a lot less than road race. But no, it can be lighter than road race in terms of wear and tear and stress on the car. So I would say that, actually, I wouldn't say that it's less critical to do the maintenance. The maintenance is still just as critical. You just might be able to go more events in between doing all your maintenance.
What are some personal tools I should bring with me to the autocross or to the track day so that I can take care of my car in between sessions or things like that?
This one's a hard one because it depends on how mechanically inclined, and also, how much work you want to do at the track. I'm somebody that if something fairly, modest breaks or needs adjustment, I'm not interested in doing it at the racetrack. I'm done for the day. Some people will pull an entire transmission and put it back together by lunch and go back out. That's not me. So it really depends on your level of comfort and how willing you are to work on your car. But to start with, extra fluid, so engine oil, some brake fluid, and maybe a tire pressure gauge, and some basic hand tools are really more than you need. Modern cars these days are complicated enough that there's very little you can do on your own in the paddock that doesn't require diagnostic equipment or a lift or some other amount of work that you just really don't want to get into at the track.
Right. Torque wrench good?
Torque wrench is probably not a bad idea.
Yeah, torque
Yeah.
those lugs down.
Yep.
Sounds good. Well, that gives some ideas for those guys and gals who've got a car that they want to take to that entry point. How about some advice for somebody who wants to start with the basics of motorsports or high performance driving, but they haven't bought that car yet that they want to use as a dedicated vehicle for that purpose? Do you have any recommendations? And it doesn't necessarily have to be brand specific or chassis specific, but what should somebody look for a dedicated track toy, if you will?
You know, there's two answers to that question, I feel like. One answer is the one that everybody has, which is Miata is always the answer. The second one is speed costs money. How fast do you want to go? And the faster you go, the more hassle it's going to be, the more it's going to cost, and the more difficult it's going to be to learn. But, I get it. Not everybody wants to drive a Miata. So, if you want to drive that Porsche, you can do that. You just have to realize that it may be harder to drive, or it may not be conducive to learning, or it might be extremely expensive to operate, significantly more than you expected. And so, picking a platform is really unfortunately down to personal preference. There are a few basic platforms that work really, really well. Miata obviously is one of them. It's inexpensive, it's reliable, it's easy to work on, there's tremendous support, and it's slow enough that it allows you to learn. It's like if you were trying to learn to walk on a tightrope, you're not going to just jump on a tightrope. You're going to start with maybe a 12-inch wide board first, and then you're going to do an 8-inch wide board and a 6-inch wide board, and then eventually you might go to a rope, two ropes, one rope, but you start something very, very easy and you work your way up. A Miata is an excellent entry point for that. That being said, there are plenty of other platforms everywhere from like a Scion FRS slash BRZ, GT86, all the same car. There are a plethora of Honda platforms that work really well for that as well. But essentially, the less horsepower you have, the less it's going to cost you to learn because your operational costs will be lower. So again, it's back down to if you want to go fast, you can go fast. It's just going to cost more money.
Right. And some of these platforms that you've mentioned, the manufacturer has made a gazillion of them. So there's prevalence of parts. If we look at affordability, which is sometimes a gating factor for that person who's on the edge and wants to take the dive. It's a rich person's hobby, some people say. But if you're going at an economy angle, should you look for a platform where there's tons of availability and parts plentiful, or people know how to work on them, or there's domain expertise that you can learn inside your community, those kind of things?
Quantity is always king. The more of those cars that are out there, the more people are working on them, the more people are racing them, the more support you have, the more vendors are going to be for aftermarket parts, the more likelihood that the manufacturer is going to support the car. Quantity is going to be king. I know that there are a number of cars out there that are little quirky, strange cars that are really great value for performance, but when you can't find a part, it doesn't matter how much value for performance you get, your car's not running. Versus a Honda Civic or a Mazda Miata, for example, there are millions of them sold. You can find them in any junkyard. The components are available at any auto store, and they're very, very easy to work on. And on top of that, being an entry-level car, the cost is low, right? So the parts components are low, and typically because they don't have the horsepower, they don't go through components as fast either. So you kind of win-win on all counts, other than the fact that you're driving a slow car. And again, some people are just not into that.
Yeah. Going back to the speed, what should people give themselves as goals or objectives to try to achieve in those first few events? I think maybe if I could step in for a second, trying to be the fastest person there on day one, I think the natural competitive juices are flowing, but maybe that's a wrong way of looking at it. Is there some maybe intermediate goals that someone who's just starting out should try to give themselves to achieve on the first go around?
Again, that one also depends on what each individual wants, right? Some people, I just talked to a guy recently. His only goal at his first track day was to hit 130 miles an hour. That's it. Didn't matter how or why or what. He just wanted to see 130 on his speedo, and that's what he did. And while I don't think that that's a particularly noble or difficult goal to accomplish, since all you have to do is floor it long enough on the straightaway, um, it's everybody has a different goal. So my big thing is bring your car back in one piece, bring yourself back in one piece, have a good time. Your first 1 or 2 days out, there's going to be so much stuff that's happening. It's going to be drinking from a fire hose. I mean, you won't know where the flags are at. You won't know what the flags mean. You won't know where your apex is at. I mean, it's going to be an absolute insane event. So, the big thing is don't stress and have a good time, and don't set goals until a little bit later is my philosophy on that. The goals will kind of materialize as you figure out where your deficiencies are and what your priorities are. And at first, you know so little, you don't even know where to go with that.
Maybe the first goal should be coachable. Turn on your ears, listen, absorb. Yeah, I think showing up and realizing that you don't know it all, and that's kind of the addictive nature of motorsports, I think, is you start getting on that learning curve, and that's what brings you back. You start to improve. You learn an attribute or a skill, and you want more of it. So maybe for those that are starting out, come with an attitude of I'm going to be coachable, I'm going to listen, I'm going to ask questions. And I think what I've observed over, now we're moving into our second decade of motorsports here, the general motorsport community is so helpful. There's no such thing as a dumb question, and people are so excited to see new people come into the sport or into the hobby. Um, how's that attitude reflect?
I mean, that would be a great attitude if everybody had that. I would appreciate that, I think, and I think the community would appreciate that. But some people don't know what they don't know, and you can't blame somebody for not knowing what they don't know. So they come in believing that, hey, I've been driving a performance car for the last 20 years of my life. There's nothing you can teach me. And I have heard those exact words, I can't tell you how many times. And, shortly after the first session, they usually figure out, oh, I'm wrong. But it's very difficult to dissuade people of that until you show them what they're missing. And so, while I would love for everybody to come with a wonderful, teach me attitude, I don't think it's necessary. It would be nice, but not necessary. If you are anybody who has any sense about you, you will figure out very, very quickly that you know so little. It's terrifying. But it's not a bad thing because everybody's, like you said, everybody's helpful. Everybody's willing to answer any questions. Most track days will not let you out on track for your first or second time without having a coach. So it's a very inviting atmosphere. You just have to accept, how little you know and just listen because there is a lot to learn. And I'm still learning after my time in the industry, and there's always something new every weekend.
Eddie, tell the audience what's going on with AR Motorsports, AR Service, where people can find you, Cobalt Racing Brakes. Give us a little tip on what's going on.
Cobalt Racing Brakes is available online. These are racing brake pads only. We do not sell any street pads, so wait till you need racing brake pads. But just send us a message on the website or via the phone number, and we're happy to help you there and pick you out the right compounds. AR Motorsports is actually running a Porsche Sprint Challenge season for a client of ours, so you'll see us at Road America soon, and then I think we're going to Laguna and Road Atlanta. And we've got a strong Lucky Dog and other series like WRL Arrive and Drive program. So if you are interested in kind of making the leap to wheel-to-wheel racing, but you don't necessarily want to commit to buying your own car or buying your own equipment, and just want to kind of dip your toe in the field or in the pool, in the water, that's a really easy way to do it. You essentially can pay to show up and do nothing but drive and just see what it's like with no real obligation other than that. You don't have to work on it or own anything or do anything. So, those are kind of the things that we're really expanding on this season and next season. So, we'd love to hear from you.
That's great. Well, Eddie is a true leader in our industry. He's an all-around great guy. His team at AR is here to support our Drive Collective members as a true partner, and we really appreciate that. But he's also out there in the greater car community to help any of you that need assistance with getting your car optimized for performance. But I couldn't think of a better first guest here on the Drive Collective podcast as we start this series. I want to encourage you guys to stay plugged in. This is just the first episode. We're going to continue on this theme of how to get started and put your toe in the water when it comes to starting with motorsports. And we're going to take it from the car, which we appreciate Eddie's inputs on getting the car ready, and we're going to transition in the next episodes about what you as a driver can learn and can take. And it's really a combination of driver and vehicle coming together, making that perfect match. So we look forward to peeling this onion and giving more feedback for you as an audience. Again, thank you for tuning in. We look forward to having you back again. And thanks for participating in the Drive Collective podcast.